Welcome to the PCN Capital Preview. I'm Larry Casper. The governor's energy plan is our topic today. But first, we're joined by John Cole, freelance journalist for the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me on this morning, Larry.
You filed a story about races for Congress that have set records for fundraising. So let's start with District 1. Which part of Pennsylvania is that?
Absolutely, Larry. So the first congressional district in Pennsylvania is located in the suburbs north of Philadelphia. It includes all of Bucks County. So again, that is widely regarded as a very purple county in the Philadelphia area. And then it also includes parts of Montgomery County, which is a little more Democratic leaning, but that is one of the battleground districts, I think, and regions of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
And who's the candidate in District 1 that's pulled ahead in fundraising?
Sure. So the incumbent is Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. He is a Republican. He is the co-chair of the bipartisan U.S. House Problem Solvers Caucus. He is in his fifth term in office currently. And that race right now, again, is shaping up to be quite an expensive one. So we don't know who the Democrat will be to face him quite yet because we have primary elections in a few months. But at this point in time, Congressman Fitzpatrick is raising an impressive amount of money. In the final 3 months of 2025, which is the most recent campaign finance reports that were made available about a week ago, he raised $865,000 in that 3-month span, which is the second most of any candidate in Pennsylvania. Now, albeit that is an impressive number, Larry, the biggest takeaway to me and to others covering this race is the amount that he has in the bank just waiting to spend. He has $7.36 million on hand. And just to put into perspective, going into an election year, combined all the Democrats that are trying to challenge him, it's $6.95 million more than the highest Democrat that is attempting to unseat him, and multiple million more than any other incumbent in the state. So he's certainly entering 2026 with a massive cash on hand advantage. Although I will note from my story, and I hope you check it out at the Pennsylvania Capital Star, Christopher Bork, who provided some excellent insight. He's with Muhlenberg College. He mentioned that although Fitzpatrick has this massive fundraising advantage at this current point in time, he expects after the Democratic primary, the fundraising will get tighter because after the Democrats coalesce around a candidate, that candidate will be able to raise funds in a better fashion.
John, try to give our viewers some perspective. In general, how much money does it take to mount a serious congressional campaign?
It's a great question, Larry. I think, again, we're just entering the election year. We're in February now. As time goes on, these candidates for Congress, particularly in these battleground districts, they need to raise, millions of dollars to really be competitive, truly. And I think also something that's worth noting is that the district in which you run in also matters because it's the media market. Certain media markets are more expensive to get ad time in. So, for example, for Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, who is seeking re-election in the Philadelphia suburbs, the Philadelphia media market is more expensive, for example, than some other media markets around the state. So in certain areas like that and parts of the 7th Congressional District where Congressman Ryan McKenzie is seeking a second term, and that's the Lehigh Valley, part of that media market is also included in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So when you're in more expensive media markets, you tend to have to raise more money.
Which Democrat has the best chance at this point to win the primary and go on and challenge Fitzpatrick in the general? Who's making the most progress on the Democratic side?
So there's not a wide variety of polling available at this point, Larry, but however, I will tell you on the fundraising side, which I think can shed some light on this, is Bucks County Commissioner Bob Harvey. He raised $370,000 in the final 3 months of the year, and then I believe he entered the new year with $410,000 roughly on hand. So again, he's in a good shape fundraising compared to the other Democrats. No one was really that close to his cash on hand. So Harvey at this current point in time has a good chunk of change compared to the other Democrats. But again, I would like to just stress to the viewers, the primary is in a few months from now. So certainly things can change. But as we speak today in February, Harvey is best positioned financially to take on Fitzpatrick amongst the other Democrats.
Now, as you pointed out earlier, Fitzpatrick is in the middle of his 5th term. Just how vulnerable is he at this stage?
So if you look at national ratings outlets across the state, across the country, and I think they do a terrific job, A bevy of them say that Fitzpatrick is favored to win. For example, I often look at the Cook Political Report, and they describe the race as, quote, likely Republican. Worth noting, though, in the state, there are 4 seats at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, also known as the DCCC. They are targeting 4 seats in the state, Fitzpatrick being one of them. 2 of those races are actually viewed as, quote, toss-ups. And maybe we'll have time, depending on how much time we have, to talk about one of those seats that is viewed as a toss-up. Right actually in your neck of the woods out in the Harrisburg area.
John, let's swing the spotlight over to District 10 and the race there. It's Janelle Stelson and Scott Perry. And who's making the fundraising news there?
That's correct, Larry. And that's one of those races I was telling you about that is, quote, viewed as a toss-up, essentially. So a lot of pundits across the country keeping a close eye on this one. And the fundraising numbers have been very impressive thus far for both candidates, quite frankly. But the big story so far is that Democrat Janelle Stelson, who ran against incumbent Congressman Scott Perry in 2024 and lost by a close margin, for the second consecutive quarter, Stelson has outraised Perry. And that is very significant when a challenger raises more than an incumbent, who usually has more fundraising at their disposal. That certainly is a story, and that's what Chris Bork told me about that. So if you're looking at the cash on hand currently, where they both enter the new year with roughly the same amount of cash on hand in the bank waiting to spend, but for the last 6 months of 2025, Janelle Stelson outraised Perry. In the most recent quarter, she raised $945,000, which is more than any candidate running for Congress in Pennsylvania. And Scott Perry's number, to be clear, is nothing to sneeze at. He raised $780,000 roughly during that same time period, which is actually the third most of any candidate. So it's safe to say it is shaping up to be a very expensive race in the Harrisburg area. So again, the 10th Congressional District is South Central PA. It's got Dauphin County, Cumberland, I think parts of York County as well. But that is an expensive race right now, or shaping up to be an expensive race, I should say. Although one thing I do want to add, primary election still has to happen. So Stelson currently has a massive cash on hand advantage to other Democrats. There is still a primary. There's quite a few Democrats challenging her, but she certainly right now is best positioned amongst the Democrats financially to win that nomination.
All right. Thank you very much, John Cole, freelance journalist for the Pennsylvania Capital Star. More of the PCN Capital Preview after a short break. Welcome back. Our guests today are the majority chairs of the energy committees in the PA Senate and the PA House. Jean Yaw from the Senate is here in our studio, and Elizabeth Fiedler from the PA House of Representatives joins us on Zoom. Welcome, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Senator Yaw, let's start with you. The governor has made a remark to the effect of utilities are making too much profit at the expense of ratepayers. What do you think of that?
I think it's a gross oversimplification of where we find ourselves today, and it's basically economics 101. It's supply, demand, and when the demand pushes supply or exceeds supply, the price goes up, and that's exactly where we are. And it's something that's happened over many, many years, and perhaps it's a perfect storm where we find ourselves now. But that's in a nutshell, that's the problem. Our demand is pushing supply or exceeding supply, and the price is going to go up accordingly. I mean, that's just going to happen.
What do you think, Representative Fiedler? Are utilities making just too much profit at the expense of ratepayers, as the governor said?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm so glad that we started with this. This is actually a piece of legislation that I have that I'm working on. It's called Return on Equity. But really, it's common sense to me. So I agree with the senator in the sense that we need to work on the supply and demand piece of it. But I think this is also really, really critical. People are having a hard time paying their bills. Utility bills are going through the roof. I hear that in my district office here in South Philly. My colleagues hear it across the state, whether it's people who live in a city or a suburb or rural location. Bills are through the roof. Prices are too high and people can't pay them. And that's the message we keep getting. I believe that is true. I have seen these bills. I received them myself. People are doing their best. They're working 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 jobs. They're picking up extra hours just so they can pay their basic bills. And so I believe as a legislature, we have to do absolutely everything we can to keep those bills down. So as the senator said, supply, that is part of it, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll get to that in this interview as well, trying to bring more energy online. But this piece of it, the return on equity piece, is so critical. We need to make sure that the utility companies, these businesses that are doing business here in the Commonwealth, in our Commonwealth, are good partners to the people of this state, to the people who go to work every day. They take their kids to school or daycare. Sometimes they go work a second job. They're doing their best. And so all we are asking, and all that the governor said really in his address, was we are calling on these utility companies not to make what's called excessive profit. Now, that's an area that needs to be discussed, that the definition of that, we need to really narrow that down and figure out what that means. But that, to me, is common sense. People are doing their best, regular people who are going to work. Those folks should not have to pay more than they need to simply because utilities would like to make, utility companies, for-profit companies that have geographic monopolies in our state, simply because they want to make even more profit. We're not saying they can't make any profit, but we're asking them to be thoughtful and respectful to the people of this Commonwealth, the hardworking people who are already struggling and are just saying, can you just not make as much profit? It's not you can't make any profit, but it's that people are having a hard time paying their bills, and we're just asking them to be good corporate partners.
Well,
and that, to me, feels like common sense.
Senator, let's return to the basic economic terms you introduced just a minute or two. You said it's a matter of supply and demand. So tell me more about the demand part. What's driving demand?
A lot of things are driving demand. I mean, the policy moves in the various states, more electric cars. There's no question data centers are driving demand. What happened in the United States and throughout the last 20 years? Our generation has basically been flat, and we've increased the use of electricity, the use of it, but we have been more efficient. For example, we all know refrigerators are more efficient now, stoves are.
Appliances in general.
Everything that we do. Okay, so there was no push to increase the supply because we were making up for that difference with the increased efficiency. All of a sudden, the perfect storm hits. The perfect storm is like, all right, we're going to their policy decisions that say we want to decarbonize. Okay, well, then we go in that direction. And then all of a sudden we get hit with data centers. I mean, 2 years ago, if somebody would have mentioned data center, most of the people would have looked at each other and said, what are you talking about? We all know that they use tremendous amounts of power. And all these things hit at the same time while we have not been paying attention to generation. Some of the conversations we're having now, we should have had 5 or 10 years ago. Had we been, I guess, prospective or clairvoyant enough to understand what was going to happen, we weren't. And we sit back and we now have to make up for what we have not done over time. With respect to, I'd just like to comment on the electric utilities. The electric utilities buy the power. They buy the power from a generator. So the generation, it's the generation supply part of the bills that are really being affected by all these things that are happening, especially the data centers.
Do the utilities buy the power from PJM?
PJM doesn't sell anything. PJM just is a traffic cop. They're like the air traffic controller. They don't own anything. All they do is PJM has about 1,400, close to 1,500 sources of generation in the PJM mix. And we talk about PJM, it's 13 states plus the District of Columbia, covers about 350,000 square miles in this part of the United States, and serves about 67 million people. PJM says, okay, of these 1,500 generators, what we do is we transmit that power from those generators. We send it, make sure it gets to the right place at the right time in the right amount. That's what they do. So it's like my comparison is air traffic controller. An air traffic controller doesn't own the planes, they don't own the airport, they don't own anything. They just direct where it goes. And PJM has, they've been in operation now for about 100 years. I think that they started in 1927. And they direct where the electric goes and from generator to where it needs to be, including to the various utilities that purchase, say, we need this power from certain generators and we need it, and PJM directs where it goes. It's as simple as that. So when you say that PJM sells power, they don't. We can talk about how they put all this together with auctions and everything, but you know, I'm sure that we may get to those questions.
Representative Fiedler, I want to give you a chance to respond to the original question, which was about just the basic economic concepts of supply and demand. You heard the senator. He said that we didn't foresee data centers coming along, and certainly we'll talk more about them in detail later on. But I want you to talk about just everyday reasons why demand is up. I mean, after all, we rely on electronic gadgets every day, and we got to charge them, right?
Absolutely. And I do agree that we part of this problem is on the supply side. Absolutely. That is definitely correct. You know, we are all pretty much everyone is using more energy than they were just a couple years ago, certainly more than they were 10 years ago, whether it's AI, video conferencing. You heard you mentioned a number of times data centers, all of these very energy intensive, high energy users. And certainly individuals have, you know, people usually don't even have just one device. Folks have 2, 3, 4, 5 devices, whether it's phones or tablets, things like that. So many different things that are using all of this energy. And so it's really like a perfect storm. As you heard, we have not brought enough generation online. Part of that is absolutely has to do with not getting enough renewable energy online. We know that solar and wind are the fastest and cheapest things that we can get online ASAP. We need to be doing that and also bringing online other sources of energy that will take time. We know that there's, you know, a shortage of parts for many of these projects. We really need to have an all hands on deck scenario right now. As I said, people are having a really hard time paying their bills already. That was true in 2025. It's true now in 2026. And all the projections are it's only going to get worse. Prices are only going to continue to go up. And so we need to find a way, and we've been doing this in the Energy Committee. We passed out a bill, Chairman Rob Matzey's bill, 1834, which would incentivize bring your own generation for some of these large load users. And that sort of thing. And you heard the governor mention it in his address as well. Some of these big companies want to come do business in Pennsylvania. Okay, we are counting on you to be able to bring your own generation so that the folks who live down the street, live down the road, aren't being impacted by your energy use. And that to me feels like common sense. Like I said, it all goes back to the people at home who really are working as hard as they can, and they are counting on us as a full-time legislature to find ways to keep their bills down and make sure they don't suffer the worst predictions like blackouts and brownouts. You know, people just want to be able to flip their light switch and have it come on. They want to know their heat's going to be on. But that's not going to be a guarantee in a couple of years unless we change our tune. And like I said, some of that is really making sure we get more renewables online. And some of it's making sure we're looking at some of this future or very close technology, things like SMRs, geothermal, really an all hands on deck, all of the above energy approach. And that's what we're doing in our committee. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting some of these bills done in 2026 and working with my colleagues and Senator Yaw in the Senate to help people back home. That's what it's about for me.
Representative, so far we've framed this discussion about energy in terms of supply and demand. So let's consider the energy that Pennsylvania exports, that there's actually some surplus energy being produced. Can you tell me about Pennsylvania's portfolio in that respect?
Sure. So when I talk to people about this, they are shocked. They are shocked that they are facing higher bills and that they're hearing projections about blackouts and brownouts and at the same time that we are exporting energy. And I understand that frustration. That makes a lot of sense to me. And so I think we need to find a way to call on these companies that are doing business here in Pennsylvania. We need to find a structural way to make sure that people here, people in Pennsylvania, nurses, teachers, construction workers, make sure those folks have reliable energy for decades to come. And I think it's going to be challenging, to be quite honest. You know, there are a lot of players in this arena, a lot of different companies and people who have gotten used to the way that things are working now. But I think if we want to be really realistic about the energy picture we face now and the crisis that we are already in, whether we're aware of it or not, then we need to find a way to make sure people right here, people in South Philly, people in Harrisburg, people in Erie, have reliable power, and we are not exporting more than we should be. And I think that's going to be really complicated, but we have to find a way.
How about that, Senator? Why not keep the surplus energy Pennsylvania produces, keep it here, and lower our bills?
Because we're part of the grid, and the grid doesn't operate that way. And I mean, Pennsylvania produces 32% of the electric power that goes into the PJM grid. So for Pennsylvania, generation of electricity is it's a big business. And yes, we generate more than what the grid needs or what we can use. We generate I think we export around 10,000 megawatts every day. But it's part of the business. And, you know, to say that wind and solar are the answers is, it's kind of an oversimplification of it. Wind and solar are, they should be part of the mix, but they're definitely, they're intermittent and they're limited duration, and I disagree that they're cheap to build. They're very, very expensive. Both wind and solar require a duplicate system because they don't operate when the sun doesn't shine, solar doesn't, and wind doesn't when the wind doesn't blow. And the other thing, too, is just to think about it. I have an 800 megawatt gas-fired power plant in my district or close to home. Actually, I have two of them in my district. But that 800 megawatt to duplicate that with solar, it would require almost 6,000 acres of land. And we just don't, I mean, we have nothing like that. So to say, oh, we're just going to have wind or solar, to duplicate that with windmills, it would take 400 windmills. And, you know, those types of things will just bring in wind and solar. Well, okay, plus it doesn't work at certain hours at 3 a.m. I always ask, where's your power come at 3 a.m.? You know, it's been cold lately. Where's the power coming from? It's certainly not coming from solar. I think solar and wind are part of the mix. But the problem is that we just have not paid attention to what we need to generate. One other comment was made about bring your own power. I did not think about this, but actually there was a data center said, well, okay, if we have to bring our own power, we'll just go across the line and build in Ohio. Well, that's not going to, I mean, so unless the bring your own power is a PJM grid-wide requirement, bring your own power, if Pennsylvania is going to be the odd man out and we're not going to be able to get the benefits that we think may be out there from data centers. So
what do you think of that, Representative? Bring your own power, that condition from the governor for data centers, could that act as a deterrent to data center development in Pennsylvania?
So I can assure you, as the governor said in his speech, that he has spoken with all of the major developers of these projects. This is not an outrageous demand. The idea that these large for-profit companies that want to do business in our Commonwealth, in the people's Commonwealth, would find a way to bring their own power to do these projects. That is not an outrageous request. These are for-profit companies that are interested in doing business here. That's a reasonable standard. I did write down something the senator said that really troubles me, and that I think it's part of the business. Like, it's part of the way that things are done. Talking about the fact that we will just keep exporting energy and that folks are somehow just going to have to deal with these rising prices and blackouts and brownouts as though there's nothing we can do to stop that. That to me is deeply troubling. And again, I hear from people who come in my district office every single day, people who often just got off an overnight shift, people are going to their second job who are having a hard time already. And I think we just, I would like to see in Harrisburg, I would like to see us all step back for a minute and find a way to get things done. That is incredibly important to me. And obviously, with the composition of our legislature, we need to find a way to get things done in a bipartisan manner. I don't think that's impossible because I think we have to find a way. Folks are going to suffer some of the absolute worst consequences, and that's going to lead to people, and this is not an exaggeration, people are going to suffer and there will be deaths if we don't find a way to make sure, for example, people can have heat in the winter when we're going through a cold snap like this. These are predictable things. There's plenty of research about it. And so I think asking these for-profit companies to come in and bring their own generation, that is not an outrageous demand when we look at the predictions for Pennsylvanians. And I really am troubled by the idea that it's part of the business. It's part of the way we do things. We can't change things.
How about address that?
We are part of PJM. We know that, but we also know the predictions we face. And so it's time to be really realistic about who we're accountable to.
Senator, try to address that point. You said the system is just the way it is, and Representative is suggesting that you should be able to change it. Do you have any desire to change it? Is it possible?
The governor at one point talked about dropping out of PJM. Dropping out of PJM, first of all, the contractual regulations that are involved would cost us, I don't know, the preliminary estimate I saw was a couple $2 billion to get out. Mm-hmm. Then the question is then, what's the incentive to have anybody come to Pennsylvania to generate electricity if we're not part of the overall grid? I guess then we would have to say, okay, we're going to have now state subsidies to entice people to come to Pennsylvania to generate electricity. The problem is all these issues are out there, and everybody, we're talking them to death, which is exactly what we're doing here. We have all these plans. We're going to do these great things. We need to be building right now. We should have been building 5 years ago. That's what everybody says. The answer to high electric prices, high costs, is greater supply. When the supply goes up, the price will come down. And until we get to that point and we keep talking it to death, the prices are going to keep going up. I haven't seen anything since we started in, Governor Wolf tried to put us in Reggie in 2019. We have not had a gas-fired power plant, commercial gas-fired power plant constructed in Pennsylvania. We've had a couple startups come in for data centers, but for the general commercial ordinary person power, put it in the grid so that we all can use it. It hasn't been done. And that's the type of thing that's causing the problems. We shot ourselves in the foot, and we've created, to some extent, our own problems. It's going to take a while to sort through them. If you talk to anybody now about, okay, how do we get generation equipment? Any type of thermal equipment, how do we get it? And how long does it take? The wait list right now, backlog, is 5 to 7 years. So, we've talked about it and we continue to talk about it. We talked about it 3 or 4 years ago and we're still doing the same thing. We haven't done anything. And if we're looking at 5 to 7 years to get the equipment, then, I wish that I could say I see something better on the horizon, but I think that we are in for some tough times, and I think that electric prices are going to continue to go up until we get that sweet spot and we entice more generation to come to Pennsylvania or into the PJM grid in general.
Representative, you want to respond to that briefly, please?
Yes, I would like to, if I could, please. The senator mentioned earlier that solar doesn't work when the sun isn't shining. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's a great opportunity to talk about battery technology. which may not be familiar to a lot of folks, but really I think it's something we should be investing in at the same time we're bringing more generation online. Battery technology can allow us to smooth out the peaks in demand. It can help to keep people's service reliable. It can keep bills slightly lower. There are things like that, absolutely, that we can be doing. And so I was anticipating when the acronym RGGI would first come up. It was 928 for the record, so we got pretty far in. And I say that just because I feel like RGGI has been used as an excuse for so long. It is in the past. We are not in RGGI now, and I'm not saying the senator said we were, but we are not in it now. It is clear to us what the picture looks like on energy and the bills people are going to have to pay. And yes, we absolutely need to get more energy online, 100%. And that should include renewable energy. There's a survey that came out that the average household in Pennsylvania would save $500 a year minimum if PJM connected more clean energy to the grid. That is not the whole picture. That's not everything we need to do. But I know a lot of families in my district that sure would like to have $500 in their savings account. You know, there are absolutely things like that we can do that make sense in our current system. And there's no reason for us to be dragging our feet and not making those changes right now. That will make a huge difference in people's lives. And yes, we need to get more projects on the grid. We need to do all of this at the same time, and I believe we can.
Representative Fiedler and Senator Yaw, I'm going to give you a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for PCN. Both major political parties had voting meetings over the weekend. Today we'll have the State Democratic Committee at 12 noon. Then at 2 p.m., the State Republican Committee will have their turn. On the issues this week, PA Attorney General Dave Sunday reviews his accomplishments and goals when he joins us Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Then right after that, we'll have Kelly Marsh from PA Unplugged telling us about a proposal that bans cell phones in the classroom. She'll be here Wednesday at 8 p.m. Journalist Roundtable returns with Dennis Owens from ABC 27 in Harrisburg, Terza Christopher from Penn Live, and Lawrence McGlynn from the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. They'll join us Thursday at 7 p.m. Now on to the history and culture side of programming. We'll have a tour of the National Canal Museum in Easton for you on Wednesday at 9 p.m. On to sports. Basketball game of the week has the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference League Girls Championship. To find out who the teams are, go to PCNTV.com. The coverage is courtesy of Service Electric Network in the Lehigh Valley. That's Friday at 7 p.m. And you can watch this show and all our public affairs programming free of charge by visiting PCNselect.com. While you're there, you can download our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. And we're talking about energy with our guest today. Now let's take a look at Governor Shapiro talking about his plan for increasing energy production here in Pennsylvania.
So we came together on a bipartisan basis last year to remove RGGI from the conversation. And we also came together on a bipartisan basis to remove your excuse for not moving forward on energy plans. So now is the time to act.
Representative Fiedler, can you comment on the governor and his plan for increasing energy production?
Unfortunately, I could not actually hear the
oh, that's right. You're on Zoom.
Played.
Sorry about that.
The governor.
Well, anyway.
I would be glad to comment.
Well, anyway, the question still stands. It's about the governor's plans for increasing energy production. And so what is he proposing as far as you can tell? And there are probably some alternative sources involved, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so as we've been talking about, I think this really is an all hands on deck situation that we find ourselves in right in the beginning of 2026. Bills are already going up. Predictions are quite dire when it comes to whether we have enough energy. We know that we do not. You heard Senator Yaw talking about options. I think we need to be open to all of them, and that includes existing technology and new technologies. none of these one things is going to be the magic bullet that will save us. And so I think we need to be very open-minded. And I think the governor has been very clear about this. We need to be very open-minded as we work to bring new sources of energy online. And in some cases, we really are quite constrained by the supply chain, by having, turbines, things like that take a very long time to produce. And so we need to be working on those projects right now to get them online as soon as we can, which is not going to be tomorrow. And we also need to be bringing online ASAP renewable energy projects. As I said, there are plenty of them sitting in the queue right now. And states like Texas, Minnesota, Maine are already far ahead of us on the renewable energy front. And whether that means solar panels or a different form of renewable energy, the sun is up there. It is shining. And if you put up panels, you can get that energy for free. I helped to create a program called Solar for Schools that has been oversubscribed and extremely successful with bipartisan support. It's a program that people like in rural parts of Pennsylvania and in cities. It provides state grant money to schools to put up solar panels. And some people might shrug and say, so what are some solar panels going to help? How are they going to help? They're actually going to help these schools across the Commonwealth save millions of dollars. That is real money, millions of dollars for schools to be able to save over the life of these panels, and they can reinvest that money back in schools. We can see that sort of change happen across the Commonwealth if we would pass community energy. I mean, there are things like this that we absolutely can be doing. Some new ideas, some ideas that have been out there. And so I think the governor is open to all of this and more. And we really, really need to come together and try to get this stuff passed in 2026, not for my benefit, not for the senators or the governors, but for the people that we serve.
Thank you, Representative. Again, sorry for that inconvenience that you couldn't hear the governor's clip. Senator Yaw, what can you comment on the governor's plans for increasing energy production? That's the main thing.
Well, he keeps saying he's all the above, which means he's not for anything. And there's no question about it. Let me go back. When I think we need to look at everything. I don't disagree with the representative. We need to look at everything. But and we're talking about, well, we're going to do this. We're going to do battery technology. When? How many years down the road? 10? 15? Why don't we build, we should be talking about building a nuclear power plant. The last one that was built in the United States took 20 some years, and it was, I forget, $15 billion. We need to stop talking. One of the other things that was said is PJM needs to approve more solar. My understanding, and the last number I had, there's 63,000 megawatts of solar generation approved, been through PJM, and it's sitting on the sidelines. Nobody will develop it. I mean, so to say that all this stuff is out there and that PJM is at fault and all these, it's just, the facts don't relate to that. As far as what needs to be done now, the most logical, quickest way to bring large amounts of power online is with natural gas. I'm not saying that natural gas, I mean, maybe we should start talking about building a nuclear power plant. I'm talking about not planning ahead, not what will battery technology do in 2035. I don't know. I'm worried about what's happening now. We need to have shovels in the ground building right now. And the most logical thing that I think, we've got the resources, we've got the natural gas, we have the infrastructure to do it. That's what we need to be. We need to pick one and say, this is something that we're going to support right now, because it is the most direct way to get more power online in a hurry.
Representative Fiedler, let's get back to the subject of data centers. And like the senator said a while ago, a year or two ago, people would have been asking, hey, what is a data center? And we're getting increasing awareness about data centers. And we know that they're kind of, in effect, computer farms, massive IT infrastructure, and that they do have massive energy needs. And can you refresh us on what they need the extra energy for? Representative, you must be in mute. We can't hear you.
I am. You're right.
There you go. Start over, please.
Thank you. I would be glad to. And first, I want to throw out there, I have had the chance to meet with the senator, and I would be quite glad to sit down again. Senator, you mentioned the need to act now and not wait. And I, too, feel that urgency. I would be glad to sit down. We can find a couple of bills that we might agree on and maybe even come back on the show and surprise people by showing how much we were able to accomplish. And
I think you have a couple of my bills in your committee.
Yes, I saw it was referred there, and I would love to talk some more. And that is genuine. Whether you'd like to come back on the show and debrief it or not, I would like to get some things done. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I would be glad to answer your question. So on data centers, we know that these are sites with that house computer equipment, processors, servers, and that they are being discussed all across the Commonwealth. You could pick up the local paper in just about any neighborhood in Pennsylvania and see a very robust conversation, lots of concerns and questions about these. As we mentioned in the very beginning, we are all relying on things like video conferencing, as I'm joining you right now, artificial intelligence, all of these things that really do require quite a bit of energy. And so data centers are, popping up. We passed a bill that I mentioned in the beginning, House Bill 1834. That's Rob Matzey's bill. We brought that out of committee. It applies to large load users and really would put in place some quite common sense regulations for these projects. It is very much a bill that seeks to make sure that regular people are not paying for the build out of these sites. And that's really important to me. We've talked a lot about prices on this show. And I think as data centers, these companies are interested in coming in and doing business, we need to make sure the people who already live here are not shouldering even more cost for the build out of those sites. That's important to me. That's what 1834 does. And that to me is a really key piece that I'm hoping we can get through the legislature. We've got that bill. We also have two other bills in our committee from Representative Mullins and Representative Donahue that would create a model ordinance that local elected officials, local municipalities could choose to use if they wanted. It's just sort of a tool for local electeds who are trying to grapple with these huge projects that are often coming very fast. And then Representative Mullins' bill, which is a reporting bill. We need to have more information about some of these large users. How much electricity are they using? How much water are they using? These to me all feel like really common sense things we should know about any major development project in the Commonwealth. And so I'm hoping we can get some of this done this legislative cycle because I think it would benefit people in all corners of the Commonwealth.
Senator, about how many data centers are coming to Pennsylvania? Are we able to say, we know there are plenty of plans out there, but who's signed on the dotted line and they're going to build?
I don't think that there's any way to determine that with any certainty at all. I know that I was talking to my staff within the last couple of days, and there's about a half a dozen data centers planned for my district. Now, those are things that are in the talking stage, and how many of them will actually come to fruition, I'm not sure. I read an article over the weekend that said that 90% of the proposed data centers will never be built. If that's the case, I mean, it's. I think it's to some extent it's true. It's a situation that people want to jump in line, get on, in line if any money becomes available for data centers, and some of them, I think the phrase is they become zombie centers because they're financed either by grants or by additional, the owners putting in more capital because they don't want to see it fail and they don't want to give up their position. But will things happen? I don't know. One of the things that was mentioned about the amount of power that they use, this year in the budget, we had put in load forecasting because what was happening, pick for example, data center would come to PPL here in this area and say, okay, we need 2,000 megawatts of electricity. Same group of people would go out to Allegheny County and say, oh, we're thinking about building out here. We need 2,000 megawatts of electricity. that, kind of skews the system in the wrong way because it's the same group asking twice for the amount. We've tried to correct that. One of the things that we're doing very much is the EDGE tax credit. We're trying to orient that tax credit, and we're looking at, my concern is what can we produce, what can we generate that goes into the grid for the ordinary people like us, like what keeps the lights on in this studio, not powering a data center. So we're trying to craft the EDGE tax credit so that it benefits those the generation capacity that really goes into the grid to serve the general public. That's kind of, walking the line and saying, yes, we want to help data centers to come to Pennsylvania. I think that they're important that we be in that mix, but the flip side is I don't want to sacrifice the general public's well-being in order to attract data centers here. So those are just some of the things we're working on.
Representative Fiedler, what do you think of what the senator said? He said that 90% of the proposed data centers might not happen.
I'm glad that the senator brought up load forecasting. I think that's actually a great example of legislation that folks might not be terribly familiar with, but that can make a big difference so that we can understand what the energy demand is, what the need is now and into the future. That's a piece of legislation that in the House, Chairman Danilo Burgos had that I supported. Sounds like the senator also feels like it was quite significant. I think there are things like that we can do that will help us to get a better picture. You heard the senator mention that 90% of these projects won't be completed. That's an awful lot of energy that folks, not energy, but energy that folks would be putting out in local municipalities, local elected officials for projects that would never, ever get it over the finish line. And so I think we need to put safeguards in place, whether it's making sure there are significant reporting requirements, deposits, things like that, so we can have a clearer picture of which of these projects are real and which of these projects really are just quite speculative. I think that's important for any industry. And the senator also mentioned EDGE, which perhaps is a place where we could do some meaningful work together. I did pass a piece of legislation out of the House that would add on manufacturing to the EDGE tax credit. Helping us to get more things like heat pumps, clean steel, clean concrete, making things here in Pennsylvania that I think is something we could get a lot of bipartisan support for. We all want to see industry and jobs online here, certainly manufacturing some of these things that can be hard to come by. We should be doing it here in the Commonwealth so it's done well and done locally. So would love to talk more about EDGE and how we might be able to get that over the finish line. As I said, I think there are a lot of things we can do. I think people back home they're tired of hearing excuses. They're tired of seeing that government isn't working for them. And so I'm quite hopeful in 2026 that we can get some things done, get more energy online, and help keep people's bills down as much as possible.
At the risk of getting into more acronyms on our show, of course, we're going to go full circle because we talked about Reggie before, and now there's a plan called PACER that the governor has, and its goals appear to be similar where it would make power plants pay for their own carbon emissions. And briefly, we only have a few minutes left, Representative. Can you say what is likely in the future for that plan and how your caucus is reacting? Try to be brief.
Try to be brief. I think it goes back to what we've been talking about this entire hour, which is we need to be thoughtful about bringing online sources of energy as quickly as possible for right now, and also being very thoughtful about planning out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. It's not as far as we think, and so we need to act quickly. That's very much at the heart of what the governor has been talking about, whether it's that specific proposal or something else. Yeah, I think we need to act now, and it's going to take a lot of time to get some of these projects online, but we truly cannot wait. So I know that proposal does some specific things. I think we're also, very interested in going in whatever direction might be most beneficial to the people of the Commonwealth and the people who work here.
Senator, we only have 2 minutes left in this segment, so I'm going to give you the last word. What do you see in the immediate future that would interest ratepayers here in Pennsylvania?
First of all, the PACER is commonly referred to as Reggie Light. So it is a revisiting of a carbon tax,
Right.
and I don't think that it's really going to go anywhere. I think that there are some encouraging things for Pennsylvanians. We've got the resources here to survive this. We've got the infrastructure. I think we just need to incentivize, and we need to act like this is a friendly place to come and do business. And I think sometimes Pennsylvania gets a reputation that it's not. We have everything that we need. We need the gas, the infrastructure, the pipelines, and to build generation equipment or generation facilities here. And that's the only thing that's going to bring the prices down. I mean, we need to increase the supply. I talked to PJM. Their candid discussions are we need greater supply. That'll bring the prices down. I think it's really interesting, of all the things that we've talked about during this hour, imagine PJM trying to manage the various factors that we've talked about: wind, solar, data centers, and everything, and then tell everybody, here, we will provide the right amount of power at the right time at the right place. That's a challenge.
All right, our guests have been Gene Yaw, Majority Chair of the Senate Energy Committee, and Elizabeth Fiedler, Majority Chair of the House Energy Committee. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Greg Rutter of the YMCA of Pennsylvania about the 80th anniversary of its youth and government program.
Welcome to our program. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the state YMCA of Pennsylvania's Youth and Government Program. Tell us a bit about this program.
Well, absolutely, and thank you for having me. Pennsylvania Youth and Government celebrating 80 years is a fully student-led experience, hands-on, if you will, right? And our students get a chance to do a variety of things, but in particular, it's the student leadership piece, right? That's essential, right? We want them to kind of be in charge. So while you and I could, stand up in front of a large room of students, maybe 700, and tell them what we'd like them to do, we have found over the last 80 years that students leading the process and buying in is the better way. And so our students are the ones that write their own legislation. Our students are the ones that argue their own cases before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Our students are the ones that serve as lobbyists, members of the press, and even run for statewide office. So they model the government in pretty much every facet possible. And again, it is a year-round experience, beginning at the club level at their school or at a local YMCA, and it culminates here in Harrisburg each April, where our students take over the Capitol.
Can you give us a little bit of history of how this program came about?
Yeah, I'd love to. Mid-1940s, 1946, the incoming Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Dan Strickler, had seen the program in New York a few years before. So this program is all over the country. We're one of many states that run it. He saw the program, and he's had to have that here. So he brought that idea and met with folks here in the Harrisburg area so that our students, our youth, could really understand the inner workings of the state government, their own government, and appreciate the merit and the value. So he was our founder. He got us rolling in the mid-1940s. 1946 is our effective begin date, and we've been running conferences and working with teenagers ever since.
Can you explain a little bit about what the state YMCA of Pennsylvania is?
I can, and it's interesting. We are very similar to just your regular local YMCA in that we are a separate YMCA. Here in the Harrisburg area, there's the Harrisburg YMCA, and they have multiple branches. And if you're from Philadelphia, they have even more branches of the Philadelphia YMCA. We are the state YMCA, and the reason why we were given that name back in 1869 was because our task, our charter, was to start YMCA's across the Commonwealth. As our footprint grew as YMCA's began, and we began to build those relationships. The state YMCA began to run programs, and the program that their signature program, our signature program, Youth in Government, was born out of those earlier experiences. And so we're like other YMCA's, except that we don't have childcare or a pool or a gymnasium or free weights, right? We're only a teen leadership development civics education YMCA, and that falls under our charter from many, many years ago.
Lastly, why should young people get involved with and be informed of what's happening in their government?
That's a great question. When this program was founded in 1946, just a couple years, right, removed from World War II, Lieutenant Governor Strickler noticed that the youth of that day needed to learn about how the government worked, right? And I think he saw some opportunities for some civic instruction. Fast forward to today, when you talk to folks, and I think that recent poll just was taken not too long ago, a very low percentage of Americans know what the three branches of our federal government are. So if you think about that piece right there, how much we're lacking in understanding, how much more so right here in our own backyard in Pennsylvania, teaching the students how government works. Now, let's not kid ourselves, right? These students, they're passionate, they're smart, they work very hard, they're prepared, but they're also in this because it's fun, right? This is a fun experience for them. They're with their friends, they're learning how to do all sorts of things that they probably wouldn't have those opportunities in any other extracurricular activity. But our focus isn't to create future politicians, right? Our ultimate goal is not to create policymakers or folks that are seeking office. Our ultimate goal is to inspire the rising generation to be leaders, to be servant leaders in their communities, in their schools, in their state, and in our nation, and then to take that civic experience and pass it on to the next generation so that we can keep democracy going each generation.
Greg Rutter, Executive Director of the State YMCA of Pennsylvania, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, for that report. Before we go, a reminder about On the Issues tomorrow. We'll talk to State Attorney General Dave Sunday about his goals and accomplishments. He'll be here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capital Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.